morning, everybody. Welcome. My name is Dr. Merav Seifan of the Swiss Institute of Dryland Environment and Energy Research, and I'm very honored to be your Master of Ceremonies for today. We are gathered here to mark three key contributions of the Halperin family: the dedication of the Esther and Michel Halperin Student Center, the dedication of the Michel Halperin Chair in Global Law and Policy, and the inaugural Halperin Lecture. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit excited to be here, so an honor, so sorry about that. You are really a large audience. I don't think that I ever, except from in a conference when it's my job to do the science, I haven't been talking to so many people, sorry. As we know, the Halperin family has long been a friend of the Ben-Gurion University, and with great vision has accompanied us throughout the years and in understanding the various needs of the university and the student in it. With a mindful conscience and bountiful goodwill, they have realized and brought to life very many initiatives that truly made a difference. Whether it's shaping the leaders of tomorrow with great social conscience or covering research opportunities in our faculty, the focus was always about how we take responsibilities and learn and give back to the society. And with that, I would like to call the president of the Ben-Gurion University, Professor Rivka Karmi, to say a few words.
Good morning, everybody, from near and far. Dear Esther, dear Lionel, Anushka, Sophie, and the excellent Halperin. Well, I'll say once Halperin, and I'm going to switch to the Russian-Israeli way of saying Halperin. With your permission, is it okay? All right. So, and the extended Halperin family, dear faculty, students, and friends of BGU. Thank you all for joining us for the inauguration of the Esther and Michel Halperin Student Center, the Michel Halperin Chair in Global Law and Policy, and the annual Halperin Lecture, and the Michel Halperin Scholarships in Law, Policy, and Ethics. And before anything, I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, Esther, that from your grief and sorrow, you actually emerged and took, all the forces that you had in you in order to put into this wonderful grand operation that we are going to inaugurate today. Thank you very much. I admire you, Esther. The State of Israel is a story of vision and action. This land, where we are right now, in the middle of the desert, could have remained just an arid, deserted region. But thanks to people of vision and action, it has become a center of advancement and knowledge, attracting scholars from all around the world. The late Michel Halperin and his dear wife Esther, who honors us with her presence here today, are among those people of vision and action. Michel and Esther were both raised on the values of Zionism and the love of Israel. They visited Beersheba together for the first time, and like David Ben-Gurion, they saw the potential of the Negev to become a source of prosperity and development for the state of Israel. The visit led Michel to become passionately involved with BGU. He served as president of our Swiss Friends Association for more than 25 years, continuing the work of his father Vladimir, the founder of the association in Geneva. Michel and Esther Halperin made a great contribution to the empowerment of various populations in the Negev when they established the Keren Moshe in 1996. This fund enables our students to participate in leadership training programs and then implement what they have learned in order to make a change in the lives of the Negev diverse communities, including new immigrants from various countries. So far, 895 students have participated in the program Transforming Vision into Action, not only in Beersheba, not only in the Negev, but throughout the state of Israel. Here at Sde Boker, Michel and Esther continue to contribute to the development of the Negev. This new student center here at Sde Boker, Esther's vision after the passing of Michel reflects his love for students and passion for desert research. Esther was enthusiastically involved in every stage in the involvement of this center to make sure it embodies the spirit and vision of Michel. Students from numerous countries come here seeking knowledge for the benefit of their own communities across the globe. This new center will serve as a home for those passionate scholars. And as I said before, I don't know how many people around me heard what I said early in the morning. This is a student center, this is a student club, but in fact, it is going to serve the whole community of the Sde Boker campus. Faculty, workers, and the wider community of Sde Boker around here, because all of you that came from the north really realized it is far away, not in terms maybe of Europe, but it is far away, and this is going to be a center, because there is nothing like that in the neighborhood. It is going to be a very vivid, very action center for everybody, and I can promise you, Estelle, it will be busy around the clock and throughout the years. Reuven Koppel already tells me that there is a list of activities that really want to be present there. A lawyer and a parliament member in Switzerland, Michel was an ardent fighter for human rights, pluralism, and democracy. In this spirit, we also inaugurate the Michel Halperin Chair in Global Law and Policy, designated to research promoting Michel's fields of interests. The incumbent selected is Professor Danny Filk from the Department of Politics and Government, and you will hear about him later on as we get to the ceremony of the inauguration of this chair. An annual Michel Halperin lecture has also been established. This year, the lecture will be given by Professor Kerry Nelson, a renowned scholar and leading anti-BDS activist, and also about him you'll hear later on. On behalf of the university, I would like to thank you, Estelle, and the extended Halperin family for your passionate involvement and precious support throughout the years. Special thanks to you, Lionel, for leading the Swiss Association after the passing of Michel, and congratulations on your recent nomination as chairman of the Geneva Bar Association, where you are also following the footsteps of your father. And I know if there is something like, if Michel is really looking from up there, he is so proud about you, Esther, and about you, Lionel, and the whole family. Thank you very much.
And I would like to call Mrs. Esther Halperin, please, for the presentation of the key to the Student Center.
So this is the traditional key. I don't think you'll be able to open, the club with it. But nevertheless, it says the Ben-Gurion University sign. It says to Esther Halperin on the occasion of the dedication of the Esther and Michel Halperin Student Center at Sde Boker. May this center provide comfort and shelter for students as they strive for excellence and seeks to extend the boundaries of knowledge. Rivka Karmi, President, May of 2018.
And please, Mrs. Halperin, if you may stay, we would really like to hear something from you today, of course.
Thank you, Professor Rivka Karmi, for your kind words, and I know it's from the bottom of your heart. And also for this surprise, because the key. Thank you. I'm very touched and delighted I must tell you that Michel and I have always admired your achievements. First in your special field in medicine, particularly in genetics, and as the first woman president of the Ben-Gurion University of the Negev since 2006. I'm glad that you are still at the university, because I was eager that the dedication of the Michel Halperin Chair in Global Law and Policy, as well as the inauguration of the Student Center, should take place while you are here. Many years have passed since my husband and I used to meet regularly, both in here and in Geneva. As you know, Michel was deeply involved in the Ben-Gurion University. I wanted to initiate something permanent linking Michel's name to this university he was so intensely committed. I asked your delegate, Elise Donat, to suggest a modest project that I could support in his memory. And when she mentioned a center for students in Sde-Boker, I thought it was a fitting project. She knew how much I'm involved and attached to the students in Beersheba. So she said, in Sde-Boker, the students have been asking for many years a place where they can meet each other. And of course, when you are here, you realize that the importance of such a place. For those who may not know, I'm involved with the students for 24 years, since Michel and I have created the Keren Moshe Fund, which has been helping the students of Ben-Gurion University with scholarships, and in turn they are requested to take a social commitment to help the local community. We have 120 students each year, and they have been doing a tremendous work, which we are very proud of. Now in Sde-Boker, my children and I are glad to see that the students will have a place where they can come together, invite lecturers, attend concerts, and organize other activities. This place will serve not only the students and researchers, but also their families. Perhaps one day, as you said, it will become the cultural center of Sde-Boker, and I'm sure that it will benefit the whole community and the whole region. The student center is not yet completed, but I hope that it will be ready and in function before the coming semester, when the students can use it. It is essential that this deadline is adhered to. I'm Swiss. And that you can find the appropriate people for the management and the maintenance. I would like to thank Reuven Koppel, who is in charge of the project, and wish to express my appreciation for the work he has done so far. I would like also to thank the architect, Ron Rosen, our friend Yair Zarmi, for his precious assistance, as well as Dana Liram, the new and efficient delegate, and of course Boris Zatzman and Brent Matthews. I hope the building will be a fitting tribute to Michel and his work. Rivka Karmi and other people insisted that it be called the Esther and Michel Halperin Student Center, which I accepted. Toda rabba lachem.
Thank you again on behalf of everybody here, Mrs. Halperin. And now I would like to introduce Emily Tran, a PhD student from the hydrology for the Zuckerberg Institute for Water Research, who is here to speak on behalf of the students. As the representative of the student body, I would like to take the opportunity to thank the Halperin family for their generous contribution of the Esther and Michel Halperin Student Center. I myself have been a student here for nearly 5 years, and I have been lucky to be a part of this close-knit community throughout my time living here in the Midrashah. This is a unique social community composed of a multinational student body. We have students from nearly every continent, representing diverse cultural backgrounds. Yet somehow, we have all come together to live in this small community in the desert. We have demonstrated a high level of academic achievement, but our uniqueness lies in our mutual support and learning that happens outside of the laboratories and our offices. During holidays of all religions, we have potlucks and festivals that are open to everybody, regardless of their religion. After the workday ends, students participate in extracurricular activities led by student volunteers, such as yoga, frisbee, creating artwork, and dancing salsa. And during the annual Steboker Games, we identify not by nationality, but by department. Go water. Even the pub provides a forum where students of various backgrounds can discuss their differing experiences. I remember one night being part of a billiard game when one team was composed of a Jordanian and an Israeli, and they were playing against a team composed of a Chilean and a German. Nobody stopped to think about how unique that was, even for a second, because this is our daily reality. We have a chance to get to know one another as individuals rather than define them by their nationality. The Student Center will play an integral part in defining this community. We are already imagining the workshops that will be held there, the community meals and performances, and the parties celebrating our continued successes. We truly would like to thank you for this gift and hope to pay it back, not only with contributions to the scientific community, but by continuing to demonstrate the unique attributes of this international community as an example for the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. As we already heard, the Halperin family's commitment to higher education began many years ago, and now we are here to celebrate their partnership with the Ben-Gurion University as we mark yet another establishment which is an example of academic excellence. I would now like to call the rector, Professor Tzvia Cohen, to introduce the incumbent of the Michel Halperin Chair in Global Law and Politics, Professor Danny Filk of the Department of Politics and Government.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I'm proud and privileged to introduce a good friend of mine, Danny Filk. Danny is a senior faculty at the Department of Politics and Government at Ben-Gurion University. He has an MA in Philosophy and Science Ideas and a PhD with a thesis titled The Neoliberalization of Healthcare in Israel. But he also has an MD degree. So for us faculty, sometimes when people approach us as doctor or professor, they say, well, doctor, it hurts me a little bit here. And we have to tell them, well, I'm a doctor, but I'm not an MD. So with Danny, you can't go wrong. With multidisciplinary approach to better understanding the intricacies of public law and policies, I'm honored to introduce the incumbent of the Michel Halperin Chair in Global Law and Policy, Professor Danny Filk. Professor Filk, Danny, we would love to hear from you today.
Thank you very much. I would like to begin by expressing my deep gratitude to the Halperin family for the generosity in founding the Michel Halperin Chair in Global Law and Policy, and to the University for finding me suitable as incumbent. I hope I will deserve your trust. Much of my research addresses the interaction between policy and rights, analyzing the way in which policies embody ethics and the way in which policies are the practical expression of rights. Especially, I address the right to health, at the interface between the local and national level on the one side and the global on the other. For example, in a recent book we edited with colleagues from the Van Leer Institute and Tel Aviv University and the School of Public Health at BGU, which is called Bioethics in Israel, Legal, Political and Empirical Analysis, published by Cambridge University Press, we discuss different aspects of the interaction between policy, law, ethics and rights, addressing topics such as public health and epidemics, reproduction technologies, end-of-life treatment, or genetic treatments. In doing so, we arrive to the conclusion that bioethics in Israel is constituted as the interaction between the global level, bioethics as expressed in the universal principles of autonomy, non-maleficence, beneficence, justice, and solidarity, and the local, traditions related to Jewish thought and to the specificity of the Israeli society and of Israel as a state. The analysis of policies as emerging from the interaction between the global and the local guides also a research done together with Professor Nadav Davidovich, the head of the School of Public Health at BGU, which compares the development of forms of public-private mix in the healthcare sector in Spain and Israel, and in which ways this mix influences access to healthcare. One of the findings of this comparison, that Israel is one of the countries with the highest percentage of owners of private health insurance, led us to a current research in order to understand this. Israel is the third country in the world in terms of the percentage of people owning private health insurance, following the Netherlands and France. This is striking. Why? Because in the Netherlands, private insurance is an alternative to public insurance. In France, private insurance covers services not provided by the public insurance. But in Israel, the main use of private insurance is as a duplicate. People buy private insurance in order to be insured for the same problems and services which are covered already by the public health system. But this is not all. Not only 80% of the population owns private insurance, but almost half of them own both private insurance commercialized by the public sick funds and insurance offered by commercial insurance companies. So in fact, we are speaking about triplicate insurance. So it's true that we Jews are risk averters and we want to be covered from all, but it's still striking why people would pay for something they are already receiving as part of their taxes. This is an unusual fact. In order to understand it, we are doing our research that combines quantitative and qualitative methodology in order to understand why Israelis think they need 3 different types of insurance. Those are some brief examples of our research in the relationship between policies and rights at the interface between the global and the local. I am sure that as the incumbent of the Michel Halperin chair, I will be able to deepen and to broaden this research. And once again, I want to thank the Halperin family for their generosity in honoring me with the Michel Halperin chair. Thank you very much.
At this point, I would like Professor Karmi and Mr. Lionel Halperin to join us at the podium for the presentation of the chair's call. Thank you, Professor Filk, and congratulations on this great honor. It's a privilege to honor the Halperin family for creating this professorial chair that will propel these groundbreaking fields of research. Rivka mentioned before the different ways of pronunciation of your name, Halperin, Halperin, I don't know if you know it, but in Yiddish, Halperin, the Halp means it's same as help in English. Very rarely somebody carries such a name so fitting what he's doing. So your grandfathers and great-grandfathers knew what they were doing by choosing this name. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Halperin family. Leonel, why don't you come to the podium and say a few words? We would like to hear from you.
Thank you, dear friends, Rivka. When I was asked to come and say a few words today, I wondered what I was going to say. And at first, of course, I wanted to thank the university and thank Rivka for everything she has done, and thank the university for making this event possible today. To tell you also how happy I am of the fact that my parents' name will be linked with this university forever, as they have been connected with this university for the past 30 years. And I was also going to tell you that I was extremely happy how well Ben-Gurion University chose to decide who would be the incumbents of the first chair, and also the 3 scholarships that we have been giving. Because we met yesterday with Professor Filk and with the 2 of the 3 students, and what struck me were 2 things. The first one is that there are extraordinary people, very involved in the local community, very involved in the development of Israel, and that therefore they are a perfect choice. But what also struck me was the fact that somehow each of them had something in common with my father. And for some of them it's quite obvious. For Professor Filk, his involvement in public policy is of course connected with the involvement of my own father in public policy for decades. For one of the 3 students, Yael, she's a lawyer at the Knesset even, and at the same time studying Jewish thought, so the connection is quite obvious as well. For the 2 others, it might have been less obvious, but one of them is a social worker. And as you know, my parents have been dedicating quite a lot of their energy for Ben-Gurion University to the Keren Moshe Fund. And as mentioned earlier, the Keren Moshe Fund is not only giving scholarships every year, 120 scholarships every year, but it's also about having those students being involved in the local community. And this is therefore a quite obvious link as well. And finally, the last one of the student is an MD, a medical doctor involved in healthcare management. And you might not all know that, but not only my uncle, Michel's brother, is a doctor, and I take this opportunity to greet him here, but also my father was in the last few years the chairman of the Geneva Public Hospital, the main hospital in Geneva, and therefore very much involved into healthcare. So I don't know if it is all coincidence or just the good choices of the university, but the connection is there already. Finally, what I wanted also to tell you is that I'm currently reading a book about my father's family history, a book about the Ginsburg family in Russia and in France. And by reading this book, I saw that the commitment of my father for this university was no coincidence. This commitment was inherited. It was inherited because already his great-great-grandfather, Baron Horace Ginsburg, back in Russia, not only was very involved with the Jewish community and with what was probably not called at the time human rights, but was also very much involved into education. And he founded the Art School. The Art School, which you may know now, has over 250 schools all over the world, including in Israel, and more than 300,000 students all over the world. And he founded this art school, and this continued over the generations. And my grandfather, Vladimir, whom you mentioned earlier, was also the chairman of the art schools, the World Art Schools, for the world for about 26 years, I believe. So the connection is there, and it happens that Vladimir, who dedicated his whole life to education, was also the first one to connect with this university at the very early stages of the university. He brought my father here, he brought me here, and so you see that everything is quite logical here. And I want to add that if you add to this fact the fact that my father Michel was born a Zionist in 1948, and that he was a strong support for Israel, even though not a blind support to Israel, but a strong support to Israel over the years. Again, the choice that Ben-Gurion University made for the first lecture, the choice of Professor Carrie Nelson, who is defending Israel, whom you've heard yesterday being so touched about receiving a doctorate of the university, and who is fighting BDS, is probably also no coincidence. Because you may not know that, but I think the last radio debate that my father participated in Geneva, in the Swiss radio, was a debate regarding BDS, and he was strongly fighting against BDS in this debate. And so to summarize, as you may have understood, if you believe in education and if you support Israel, I'm sure you will all agree that there is no other choice than Ben-Gurion University.
Thank you very much, Mr. Halperin. And now we are approaching the third part of our ceremony today, and I would like to call Professor Mark Clarfield, the Director of the Medical School for International Health, to give the introductory remarks to the inaugural Halperin Lecture, The Academic Assault on Israel, A View from the US, which will be given by Professor Carrie Nelson of University of Illinois, USA.
Merci beaucoup. Rivka, I'm going to go off text for a second here. You're a geneticist. Is there a gene for altruism? Okay, so the Halperin family, I have to tell a very quick personal story. In 1978, I was married to my wife, we're still married. We went to Geneva for our honeymoon, and Vladimir was best friends with my father and mother-in-law. And we had Shabbat dinner with you and Michel, and who's the doctor, the hematologist? You remember me? Au revoir, Marc? I didn't see you there. Bonjour. Okay, oh great, you're here. Okay, we had Shabbat dinner with this whole family. And Vladimir and his wife not only looked after us, they sent us to a hotel, Le Clos Voltaire. Does it still exist? Le Clos Voltaire, something like that? No, it's dead. We stayed there and they closed it down. We got to this hotel and we checked in and we went to pay, and they said, no, it's been paid for. We were on our honeymoon. I said, who paid for it? He said, Vladimir Halperin. So merci beaucoup. My children think, and they're right, I'm not spiritual enough. They said, Dad, you have to believe in karma. I don't, but now I do. So, anyway, karma. Rivka karma. Anyway, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to make this a bit shorter because I see we're short on time, and I want to make sure that we give enough time to our speaker, Carrie Nelson. So, Carrie Nelson grew up in Philadelphia, got a BA, then a PhD. He's a doctor, but not a doctor. He's a professor doctor. He taught modern poetry and literary theory at the University of Illinois, and he's a professor of English emeritus. But he's known not only as a blunt and devastatingly witty commentator, which he is, on higher education, but also as an activist, working hard to reform it. I won't go into all the details because it'll probably frighten Rivka to find out what he's done to universities, mixing things up with the administration. We're not talking about that. But on another side, he's long been active with the American Association of University Professors. He was the organization's vice president and president for many years. His background is also genetic. I think, am I right? Were you a red diaper baby? You were, okay. Whoever doesn't know what a red diaper baby is, come to me afterwards and I'll explain, but he was. So those kinds of people were active in US anti-war work in the 60s, and he served as a draft counselor during the Vietnam War. And one of his, as a scholar, one of his interests is the culture of the American left. Another interest we have in common, which I don't have time to go into, he's interested in the Spanish Civil War. And we can talk about that another time. One reviewer wrote that, quote, Nelson has always been a doer and a risk taker, and few commentators are neutral about his impact on higher education. He's been hailed as a samurai professor. Oh, right? He's authored and edited, and this is relevant today, more than 30 books. He has a special interest in the BDS movement. He's co-authored or co-edited 2 books on the BDS movement, and he is indefatigable. He's indefatigable. He never tires in defending Israel against false accusations, and you'll hear more about that this morning. I won't tell you how I first met him, because we don't have time for that, but if you're interested in the Spanish Civil War or how I first met Kerry Nelson during the coffee break. Ladies and gentlemen, Kerry Nelson, the subtitle of his talk is How to Take the BS Out of BDS.
Hello. Mark warned me not to kick the light, and then he proceeded to do so. I want to begin by thanking everyone at BGU, your president, and the Senate committee for the very great honor of recognizing the work that I and others have been doing to give Israel yet one more voice amongst the diaspora across the sea. It's been a great privilege to work with faculty friends at BGU and other Israeli universities to counter the relentless efforts to delegitimate the Jewish state that have really so intensified in the new millennium. And the folks that I work with most closely, I think you know well, Mark Clarfield, and we're on email all the time, Ilan Troyan sitting behind him. Ilan actually took me to my first trip to Israel some years ago, and so he bears some responsibility for all of this. And you won't be surprised that the third person who receives email requests for information from me and answers them is your president, Rivka Karmi, and I hope that she continues to answer my emails in the years to come. I write, perhaps you should know, as a Jew. My Hebrew name is Kiva ben Acharon, and my grandparents on my father's side came to the U.S. from the Ukraine in 1895. On my mother's side, with the family name Cohen, my family came from Poland. The family story is that Nelson was a gift of immigration officials on Ellis Island, and I actually don't know what our Russian name was. I was born, oddly enough, on May 15th, 1946. Of course, 2 years later to the day, Israel was born, and I had a new reason to celebrate my birthday every year. I'm here with Paula Treichler in the front. She's both a colleague at the university and my partner of over 50 years. We share a commitment to Israel, and we are each other's most unsparing critics of our own scholarship. In the United States, many Jews forget that their equal opportunities were not always guaranteed, and they forget their ancestors' history, and they imagine that a relationship with Israel now is optional. But in many parts of the world, the bond with Israel is not so easy to set aside. The call of the Jewish homeland and its capacity to liberate Jews worldwide still resonates. It's deeply embedded in the psychology of what it now means to be Jewish, even among the minority of Jews who wish it were not so. No diaspora Jew lives only in one place or one country. There is another place, a Jewish state, that gives all of us a unique, dynamic, two-part geographical identity. We each have another self who lives there as well as here. Israel is thus a part of who we are. It's part of our identity and our history. I say these things, even though you already know them, because I think this is a moment where you should hear them from an American once more. As a grandchild of immigrants, I'm aware of a family history that includes other countries, but I think that in no way compares with a living relationship with a people's homeland. And that relationship itself is dual because Israel is a contemporary society saturated with an ancient past. You walk through fields and among hills, and in Jerusalem especially, you feel that ancient past beneath your feet and you breathe its air. Across the world, Jews in many countries still need a contemporary confidence that they can emigrate, that there is a homeland they can return to if need arises. In many places, Jews cannot feel liberated where they are without Israel both as a source of pride and a practical option. Even if you never exercise the option of making Aliyah, the fact that the option exists makes a difference in your life. With the resurgence of anti-Semitism in many parts of the world, the rebirth of far-right political groups, and continued propagandizing by the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, all of it devoted in part to demonizing and delegitimating Israel and its Zionist inspiration, we need to remind ourselves of Jewish peoplehood and to remind everyone that Zionism was born as a national liberation movement. That foundational history as a liberation movement was not erased once its primary goal of creating a Jewish homeland was achieved, nor is it erased because a Jewish state capable of defending itself now exists. The long arc of that history and the need it expresses still culminate in the gift a homeland gives to Jews worldwide today. The boycott and divestment movement that rejects that history got its inspiration in Durban, South Africa in 2001, took root in Britain and the United States the following year. 2002 was the first year we saw contemporary academic boycott and divestment proposals. BDS became an international movement in 2005, but it was already underway before then. The Zionism is racism equation that was born in Durban in 2001 is now commonplace in some areas of the European and US Academy. Indeed, it gets more intricate and elaborate articulation today than it has ever had before. There are faculty members who devote much of their professional lives to creating hostile fantasies about Israel, writing books and essays that are celebrated by readers that revive ancient blood libel accusations in contemporary form. They disparage the legacy of the Holocaust. They claim that Israel's treatment of the Palestinians is comparable to what African Americans suffered under slavery. And they claim, insanely, that Israel is engaged in genocide. And they've now invented a term, slow genocide, since it doesn't seem to be happening so fast. And those presentations are often met with applause on American campuses. And in classrooms across the country, these forms of slander find a place in the curriculum itself. If these claims seem not just bizarre or offensive, but ludicrous, I can only say that one has to deal with madness and hostility as they exist. I recently spent many weeks working with Israeli nutrition experts, gathering the evidence to prove definitively that a celebrated BDS leader had no basis for claiming that Israel was trying to stunt the growth of Palestinian children. The goal was not just to prove her wrong, but also to prove her irresponsible and unprofessional, to undermine her current and future credibility as a scholar. It turned out that UNICEF, the World Health Organization, and indeed the Palestinian Authority all say that stunted growth is not a Palestinian problem. And not all of those entities are fans of Israel. More than anything else, this is a battle for hearts and minds of the next generation. Thus, while the BDS movement presents no clear and present danger to Israel today, it is grounds for concern. Overall support for Israel remains roughly unchanged in the United States, but that support has become more politicized, and support amongst Republicans has increased while support amongst young Democrats has decreased, so the level nationally remains the same, but it has become politically inflected, which I think is not a good thing. It's not trivial to see young students, as a result of these BDS debates, turned into lifelong opponents of Israel. Among them, unfortunately, a few Jews who themselves joined the anti-Israel crusade. Opposition to the Jewish state has gradually corrupted some of the Academy's core values and professional standards. Faculty who want to produce anti-Israel pseudo-scholarship have scores of books and essays they can cite in support of their accusations to give their work the appearance of wide scholarly endorsement. University presses and academic journals who want to develop an anti-Zionist profile have a whole cohort of peer reviewers who will endorse anti-Zionist manuscripts and urge publication. The standard word is that they are courageous. That's over and over again. In some disciplines, faculty members can build whole careers disseminating anti-Israel views that I think sometimes cross the line into anti-Semitism. The pursuit of truth, the most fundamental of all academic values, as a result is replaced by professional rewards for disseminating political propaganda. Over the last year, we've seen increased willingness to interrupt Israeli speakers spread more broadly to a pattern of interrupting or trying to cancel other invited lectures by people whose views some students and faculty find objectionable. At Berkeley, Israel critic Judith Butler helped organize a demand to cancel a presentation by a right-wing provocateur. Anti-Israel politics has also invaded the academic job search process and the principles undergirding tenure and promotion reviews. But these deliberations are ordinarily conducted privately, so it's difficult even for faculty within the same institution to evaluate them unless they serve on review committees. So the main publicity available for anti-Israel views is what people publish. That's really the object of criticism that's most essential. This is time-consuming and challenging work, since someone can make an accusation against Israel in a sentence. But gathering the evidence to refute them requires a lot of work, labor-intensive, and it's much longer. But those of us fighting these trends have allies in the West and in Israel who help us wage this battle, including, as I pointed out, friends here from BGU. This creates a sense of community and solidarity that offers both material and interpersonal support, friendships across the sea. But if I can put one serious challenge on the table without ruining a celebratory occasion, because I am constitutionally unable to deliver a lecture without at least offering you one challenge. Let me say that there is one policy area that puts the diasporic community's ability to defend Israel at risk. I had no problem defending Israel's conduct of Operation Protective Edge as reasonable and measured. I also feel Israel has a right to defend its border with Gaza against the effort to breach its rather fragile fence. Better that than see thousands of Gazans cross into Israel and create a major crisis. I say that not knowing what May 15th this year will bring, which is supposed to be the apex of the Gaza effort. On the other hand, as a former president of the American Association of University Professors, I had no hesitation in joining Israeli universities' presidents in condemning the code of ethics proposed to govern faculty political speech, first proposed last year and maybe on the verge of being adopted. It's hard to say for certain. There is a red line, however, that if crossed, will lose Israel's support of many in the diaspora, and that's actual annexation of a substantial portion of the West Bank. I've long felt that some of the pronouncements of the Israeli right, whether the call to move Israel's Arab citizens to the West Bank or the call to annex 60% of the West Bank, could be discounted as fringe political posturing. Now I'm not so sure. Israeli politicians are smart enough not to provoke major US and international outrage by implementing major annexation overnight. But less dramatic steps toward annexation, a staged process with less symbolic resonance in Western capitals, now seem a real possibility. West Bank annexation if it permanently institutionalizes a second-class legal status for Palestinians, denying them the right to vote in Israeli elections, permanently installing two legal systems, one for Jews and another for West Bank Arabs, preserving the separations of areas A, B, and C, I think would give serious credit to the A word, that is the ultimate delegitimizing of Israel label for the Jewish state. It would also make it impossible for Israel to plausibly claim its dual status as both Jewish and democratic. Both the political rights of Palestinians and the self-interest of Israelis argue against annexation. But that may not stop a given government from moving further in that direction. As one of my friends pointed out, annexation would be a profoundly anti-Zionist move because it would undermine the Jewish basis of a Jewish state, something that I think needs to be preserved. If Israel finally acts on annexation, we could still defend Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state within its pre-1967 borders. But at that point, it would be a rather hollow stand. Annexation is not a policy that can be reversed. It would revise the meaning of the Jewish state, not just amend its borders. It would be a new definition of the nation. To urge Israel then to reverse course and create a Palestinian state would seem as much absurd as unrealistic. The boycott movement then would grow, not academic boycotts, but perhaps a comprehensive economic boycott. Limited boycotts of West Bank products would also be emptied of persuasiveness as a tactic. Would we lose faculty and students who currently stand with us? Absolutely. Would the real membership of JVP, Jewish Voice for Peace, not a group I admire, would it grow? Yes. Would some prominent US and European politicians break with Israel? Yes. For those of us deeply invested in the two-state solution, our kindest response might then, with annexation, be silence. Given all these considerations, I think it would be unwise for Israel's supporters abroad, some of whom are here today, simply to wait upon events to unfold. We need to begin talking among ourselves about what annexation would mean, about whether it could provoke a South Africa-style boycott movement, and about what we can and should do. That means not just strategizing for the future, but thinking about what to do now. So I think a broader and more focused campaign against the possibility of annexation is necessary now. I realize many on the Israeli right will not care what Americans say, assuming their support amongst Republican evangelicals will still carry the day. Many will not care either about increased alienation among the diaspora in the US and Europe, or even about increased political polarization over support for Israel. But some will care, and action now may help empower those in Israel who understand that keeping support for Israel separate from US partisan politics is not just desirable, but really essential over the long term. So that's my tough love message for today. It may be one area where Ehud Barak's recent call to encourage Israelis to save Israel from itself has some authenticity. I'm not naive enough to believe the alternative to annexation is a call to return to the negotiating table now. I'm not persuaded either the Israeli government or the Palestinian Authority is ready for that. For years, I believed all that really mattered was a formal policy against settlement expansion outside the blocks near the Green Line. In other words, keeping open the possibility for a two-state solution, even if it wasn't about to be realized. I'm among those who believe a settlement agreement would have to be implemented in stages, perhaps over a decade. I join with a group of 280 former IDF generals who suggest that a solution, once agreed to, would still take a decade to realize in stages. Otherwise, a Hamas-style takeover of the West Bank would indeed be possible. A stand against settlement expansion east of the security fence, I think, remains essential. But it now has a second component, open confrontation of the possibility of annexation. I cannot overemphasize how difficult it is to argue for such a mix of positions in the US. On the left, there is little patience for nuance when slogans like "Palestine will be free from the river to the sea" are apparently so much fun to chant in unison. Better that than think about anything. Worse still, in my view, is the well-meaning one-state delusion that Jews would remain safe in a majority Arab state. That, I think, is a fantasy and nothing more. On the right, there's significant support for the greater Israel concept that I just criticized. It's not just BDS that presents a continuing challenge, therefore, but the resistance to serious discussion of any serious alternatives to the status quo. There are, therefore, two jobs: defeating BDS and promoting a more nuanced dialogue about the challenges Israel faces. One thing is certain: I don't have to worry about what to do when I get up in the morning. There are tasks lying ahead. And I'm immensely encouraged to continue that work and to bring others aboard by the genuine honor that Ben Gurion University of the Negev did me this May. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Nelson. And this concludes our first part of our meeting today. We are going to have a short break, and I want to remind everybody that after this short break, we are meeting here today to hear the annual review of research activity in the Jacob Blaustein Institute for Desert Research. Thank you.